Not so long ago, I found myself thinking about how I missed the 5Ds era of Yu-Gi-Oh, where, more times than not, just setting a face-down defense position Raikou Lightsworn Hunter was combo enough. A time where the biggest concern to me was making sure that my opponent didn't have that fourth Lightsworn name in their graveyard to be able to summon Judgment Dragon, where a card like Dark Arm Dragon lived on the limited list for a long time due to being one of the most powerful cards in the game. The days of needing to meet the correct levels along with a tuner and a non-tuner to access synchro summoning. Days where tribute summoning didn't feel like a -1, and days where Jeff Jones pioneered one of the funnest strategies of all time, Quick Draw Dandy Warrior. The time where Blackwing wasn't just a meme deck. That's why I created this channel. Welcome to the Edison Club.
What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Edison Club. Today is a video that I never really thought that I would be making, but I've had quite a few people reach out to me and wanted me to do a shuffling video, the different kinds of shuffling, whether it be just shuffling your deck, shuffling your hand, things of that nature, and then things that might impact or change your shuffling, such as this kind of type of sleeves you use or the type of playmat that you choose to use. We'll go ahead and jump straight into this thing, guys. As always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Really motivates me to keep going, keep making content for you guys. So it means a lot when you click that button for me. So, teaching shuffling, do's and don'ts. The first thing that you're going to want to do is not be like me and use your very high rarity Edison Lightsworn deck for this. But I have been doing this for quite some time, so it's second nature to me. If you are just now starting out learning how to shuffle, I'd recommend going to your local card shop. They would probably just give you some basic lands from the Magic the Gathering game. Those are supposed to be free. Pick up a very cheap pack of sleeves, and that would be the best way to be able to learn how to do this properly without damaging anything of value. Or if you have old bulk, just take out some of your bulk, sleeve up a deck, and that can be your practice deck. Is sleeves. Sleeves can very much impact the way your deck shuffles, the way your deck feels, the way your deck moves. So the sleeves I'm using here, these are actually hyper matte white. They do have a little bit of texture on the back, not much. These sleeves do shuffle really well. They glide across your playmat very well. You can do things like this very easily with them. There are a lot of sleeves out there on the market. You have stuff such as obviously your Hyper Matte. You still have your Ultra Pro. You have your Dragon Shield, both matte and classic. In the Dragon Shield line, I actually prefer the classic over the matte because it is a lot like the classic. It is a lot like the Player's Choice sleeves that a lot of players swear by, which are very hard to come by now. So the classic Dragon Shield is actually my favorite. Then you have other kinds such as Ultimate Guard, Katana, all basically the same thing. They're all card sleeves. You just need to find a brand that you like, find a brand that works out the best for you that you really like. So for me, it's the Hyper Mattes or the classic Dragon Shield. Also, things that are going to impact your shuffling is your choice of playmat. As you can see here, this is the Pyramid, Judgment Dragon, and Minerva cloth playmat. So the cloth playmat lets you have a little bit more texture, and you can actually slide your graveyard a little bit easier. So I'll do this exact same thing that I just did here on one of my rubber playmats for you guys so you can see the difference on it. So I'm going to try to do the exact same thing I just did, and you can kind of tell that the cards just don't really glide. They kind of get stuck together. I can kind of do it just because I've been doing it for a long time, but it definitely doesn't catch as well as a cloth mat does. Now, some people don't like cloth mats. Some people swear by rubber mats, and that's okay. It's just going to take a little bit more practice and a little bit more perfection, a little bit more perfecting to be able to get yourself where you want to be on your shuffling. Our first style of shuffling today is going to be very simple. It is the classic cut. So right before you begin a game, you offer your deck to your opponent, and this is just a very classic cut like this. Nothing more, nothing less. I've seen people cut in threes like this. I've seen people cut in fours like this. And then you have some people that do this thing where they like take the bottom card or the top card and put it on the bottom. It's all basically the same thing. Anybody can do this. This is the most common type of like cut that you do before a game. If I'm playing against somebody and their deck is very expensive, like someone that I know, that's normally the cut that I end up going for. That way I'm certain I'm not going to bend or damage anybody's cards. The number 2 style of shuffling is what I personally would call like the YuGi or the KAIBA style of shuffle. Sometimes you'll see like a lot of the older folks at your locals doing stuff like this, but basically it's just taking the bottom of the deck and throwing it on top over and over again. And sometimes you can pull from the middle. I think it's a very sloppy, very gross way to shuffle. Then you also have some of your old timers that can shuffle like this. And this type of shuffle is basically you're holding your deck of cards primarily with your thumb and your left ring finger. I'm right-handed, so if you're left-handed, this is going to be the opposite for you. And kind of just using the middle finger and your index finger kind of as just supports. So you're pulling from the bottom, and as you're pulling, you're very quickly letting go. So just like this, very quickly letting go. Now, that's the left hand. The right hand is, once again, my ring finger and my thumb pulling from the bottom of the deck. Sometimes I use my middle finger as just a little bit more support. A lot of people will just use these 2 fingers. Sometimes I'll kind of put my pinky up underneath just for extra support. I don't really shuffle like this often. And then sometimes I'll use all 3 fingers, but it's kind of the same thing no matter which way you do it. You're pulling from the bottom up to the top, and you can continue. You can pull the same amount every time, or you can go until it gets significantly smaller over and over and over again. So that's a good way to randomize your deck as well. The third style of shuffling is the style of shuffling I'm not going to showcase with this deck. But basically, if you've ever been around anybody playing poker cards, that's when you would take 2 halves of the deck, spread it down like this, and then you kind of do like this, except significantly more violent. There are some variations of this, like sometimes you can see this right here, and take the corners. Once again, I'm not very good at this because I don't shuffle this way. But sometimes you do see people that shuffle like this. I am actually terrible at it. I would not recommend shuffling like this with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. The card stock that Yu-Gi-Oh uses is very thick. You might could pull off shuffling this, obviously, with like casino cards. But you might could pull this off with like Magic the Gathering or something like that. But I wouldn't recommend it for Yu-Gi-Oh! I tried to learn how to shuffle like that a long time ago. Ended up bending some cards, and that's never a fun time. So I would recommend staying away from the shotgun shuffle. Okay, this is probably the one that you see the most. It's probably the one that you see me do the most on the channel. And this is what a lot of people would call like the fan shuffle. So basically what you're going to do is you're taking your left hand. So my thumb is on top. I have my pinky, my ring finger, my middle finger, and my index finger, just like this. It's almost the same formation that I showed you in the YuGi or KAIBA style shuffle. So for this, I'm going to take my right hand, my thumb, and my middle finger, grab half the deck. I'm going to pick it up. So now my left hand has half the deck. My right hand has half the deck. And basically what you're going to do is we're not going to push. You never want to just force cards together because that's how you damage cards and your sleeves. Your sleeves are not going to last you any time at all. And your sleeves are quite literally going to be the only thing protecting you from destroying your cards. We're just going to just feel it. This is something that takes time. So you can see here, basically, one card is going in between all of the other cards, just like this. This is step 1. You need to master this part first. Let them fall. You can lightly, let me repeat, very, very lightly push or I guess guide would be the better term, but you're letting gravity do the work. And doing this way, you can kind of start to let your hand open more and more and more at a time. So like if I just open my hand a little bit, sometimes I'll get cards that fall back out. But when you start to be more intermediate at it, you can open your hand a lot, and then you still mess up because no one's perfect. But what I was saying was you can open your hand a lot and it kind of does flip out more and quickly. So after you've mastered the art of letting the deck fall, this is when you're going to start opening up your hand, as I've just been telling you. I'm going to kind of do this in slow motion. You can kind of see the cards falling. This just takes time. This takes practice. Notice that when I start to put the two decks together, my hands on my left hand move to more of an open position. If I try to do it like this, nothing happens. So you have to make sure you get those hands opened. Just like this. Over and over again. This is my favorite way to shuffle. I do feel like you get a pretty random assortment. What you really need to get good at is making sure that every card, I always say, has a window. You don't really want there to be multiple cards in one window, like right here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's two cards in one window. A lot of your pro players will shuffle just like this because it's the best way to shuffle to avoid having multiple copies of something stick together. So that is the quote-unquote fan shuffle. That's probably going to be the one that you're going to see the most when you go to an event. And it definitely looks the nicest. It feels nice. Once you get this down, it does seem like it glides very easily, becomes second nature. Back when I used to work at a restaurant, something that I would do would be if I was working the cash register while I was waiting on customers, I would actually shuffle the gift cards. And that kind of just gave me something to do and gave me time to kind of practice working on my shuffling. Okay, so the next method of shuffling is called power shuffling. And there are a lot of variations of this. I've seen a 4-card pile shuffle before. A lot of times the most common I feel like you see is 8. I've also seen a 10-card pile shuffle before. It doesn't really matter. Basically what you're just trying to do is just go around the table here and make little stacks of cards. This is just getting all your 2 ofs, getting your 2 and 3 ofs separated, hopefully, and kind of just randomizing your deck. A lot of people would say this isn't true randomization because true randomization is not reversible, and this obviously is. But this does tend to work pretty well. A lot of times what I'll do when I'm in this sort of formation here is I will actually go in almost like a checkers kind of motion diagonally and pick these up. That way I'm sure I'm not just putting the same cards right back on top of each other. So, and then what I'll do is after I put them back together, you see I have 2 decks now. A lot of times I will just shuffle each individual deck a couple times, trying to get the most randomization I can, and then finally just bringing the decks together just like this. Okay, this next one is one that I actually learned about today from a guy that goes to my locals. His name is Diego. I'm sure he'll be watching this video. This one he nicknamed the Cascade Shuffle. And basically with this shuffle, from my understanding, is it's much like the fan shuffle where you're just letting cards go into windows. But instead, you're letting gravity do more of the work, and you're kind of just doing this very sloppy, let cards just fall wherever they fall. As you can see, cards aren't really getting shuffled into windows. I'm getting multiple cards shoved into a window. I'm probably going to end up drawing a lot of multiple cards or cards that have stuck together, combo pieces like that. That's a shuffle that I probably would not recommend doing. Commonly called mana weaving because normally you're going to see this one in Magic the Gathering. Now, to the best of my knowledge, this is illegal across the board universally in card games, but I figured I would show this to you. That way, at least you are prepared. So basically, Magic the Gathering requires you to have lands to be able to play a land every turn, be able to play your cards. YuGiOh does not have that, but this can still be carried over to YuGiOh. So this may not work out exactly correctly because normally your creature and your like sorceries ratio to your lands is very similar, but with Lightsworn, we do play a lot more monsters than we do spells and traps. So we'll see how this ends up working out here. So basically, the way that this would work in YuGiOh is before the game begins, people would go somewhere in the room and they would kind of do like this: spell, monster, spell, monster, spell. And basically, I'm just gonna do this until I run out of spells and traps. This was very common back in the day, and I'm sure a lot of people still do this. So here's our little deck. You can see we have a lot more monsters left over that we didn't actually use, but so a lot of folks would have their decks sort of pre-stacked like this. So when you go to a tournament and you sit down for round one and you just cut like this, your opponent's deck, oh, it's good, it's fair, you know, my opponent's not cheating me. Well, not exactly, because now my hand is perfectly ratioed, as is the rest of this deck. All the way through. All the way through. So you want to make sure that you're not doing this. You want to make sure that your opponent is not doing this as well. For our last shuffle today, guys, I'm going to be showing you one that kind of does prevent your opponent from stacking. We've all had our suspicions about that person I played against all the time. They really seem like they just draw very, very well, or they always see this card. So if you want to prevent that, a good way to destack, if your opponent's deck is stacked, let's say they've put their combo pieces together where they'll stay at the bottom, etc., etc. You are suspecting your opponent is cheating. This is a way that you can prevent that cheat. So never want to look at your opponent's deck. Always have it where you can't see it. You want to just hold in your left hand the deck, 3 fingers here, middle finger underneath, supporting the bottom, thumb on the left. We grab from the top 1 card and from the bottom 1 card, and those make a stack. We do this until the entire deck is gone. To the best of my knowledge, there are no stacks that you can do that are going to be able to stack through this, because you're pulling from the top and the bottom of their deck. So if they put their better cards on top or the better cards on bottom to try to get you to just cut like we talked about earlier, it is going to unstack that there. So that is one thing that you can do to kind of be able to prevent cheating. And sometimes I'll just shuffle like this just in general. I did see one of the pro players at an event one time do this, and it's just good to stay in a habit of that, because if you do encounter a player that is trying to stack or is trying to cheat, it's just good all across the board to be able to know that their deck is 100% randomized. All right, so hand shuffling. This is the part of the video I've been dreading, because even myself, I don't feel like I'm great at it. We're gonna go over a couple things about hand shuffling today. So we've all been watching a stream, and this is all that we hear. So this does become a nervous tick after a while, and you just find yourself just doing it over and over again for no reason. Even if you have no responses, you're just sitting there and you're just doing this. And these sleeves are very, very worn out, so it's actually kind of difficult for me to do this. But a lot of people really want to know how to do this. So the way I learned is basically I took some old cards that I had and ended up destroying them. So because sometimes you do, when you're learning, you'll like swipe with your thumb and you'll end up crunching a card. You don't want to do that, especially with this hand. But let's just look at one hand for now. This is my hand. Looking at all 6 of my cards. If I am going to want to hand shuffle, this is the formation that I start in. 4 fingers on back, thumb on front. The thumb is going to be what swipes the top card to the left. Okay? So just supporting my other cards with my right hand, a very quick, and basically what I've done here is I've used my thumb to swipe Heavy Storm to the back. The same way that I will do Beckoning Light, YuGiOh, Wolf, Solar Recharge, until we're back to Phantom of Chaos. The right hand is going to assist in moving this. You see this motion is much smoother than just the violentness. See how much I'm bending this Beckoning Light? It's actually making me cringe. But when you throw in the right hand to be able to kind of move this and guide it in tangent with the left hand swiping, you kind of get this nice little motion here. Obviously, like I've touched upon in this video several times, if you're left-handed, this is going to be a little bit different for you. But yes, so your left thumb is going to pull while your right finger's in this formation here. So I have a thumb on top. I have my finger is my index finger is the most prominent. It is being held probably about 3/4 of the way down. And then my other 3 fingers are just in line here, and it's resting on my middle finger while I'm doing this. So I'm resting the deck of cards that's in my hand, the rest of my hand, on my middle finger. Once again, this just takes practice. You could do this 1,000 times. You could master it the first time you do it. It could take you 2 months to figure this out. But let's take a second here and talk about the advantages and also the disadvantages of hand shuffling. So I'm going to get a card that really stands out here. Let me just find something in my deck that I feel like really just stands out. The Secret Charge of the Light Brigade. Okay, so if this is my hand, okay, and I'm going first, and I draw a card, okay? Now, your opponent could be tracking the cards in your hand. So if I'm constantly shuffling like this, okay, and let's say, I do some stuff. I do Heavy Storm. I do like Solar Recharge. Let's just say I just draw some cards. I mill some cards just for the sake of argument. It doesn't matter how many. But this is my hand. Now, my turn is over. I pass to them. They do their thing. Now I draw for turn. It's Lumina. When I start to hand shuffle, just like this, you can see that my hand is not randomized. All I have simply done is move Lumina from the front of my hand to the back of my hand. I'll kind of show you this in more of a controlled environment here. So, Lumina is my draw for turn. You can see that Lumina is the top card in my hand. When I hand shuffle, even though I think I've randomized my hand, all that Lumina has done is just move to the back of my hand. So if my opponent is able to keep track with their eyes, they'll be able to know which cards I'm not using. They might be able to gauge what kind of a hand I have if I'm not ever playing the cards I'm drawing, but I'm playing my older cards. So no matter how many times I do this, Lumina is always going to just be in the same spot. So let's take, for example, the way that I like to do this. This is my hand. I'm hand shuffling. I draw for turn. It's Lumina. What I normally do is I'll do like this a couple times. And then what I like to do is put my hand fully together. You can see it's just like this, front and back, and kind of shuffle from the middle out a few times. So now Lumina is the next to last card in my hand. And Lumina is going to maintain that positioning throughout all of these hand shuffles. So draw for turn. If you do want to do your little hand shuffle, just make sure that you are doing this shuffle as well, so you're not giving your opponent free information about what cards you're using and what cards you're not. Yu-Gi-Oh is all about trying to not give away information. You don't want to ever give away free information. Okay, the last thing here that someone asked me to cover is the graveyard slide, like I did in the beginning of this video. So, when I was first starting out Yu-Gi-Oh, I would actually pick up my graveyard when I needed to look at it and simply place it back down in the graveyard zone. To me, this is the best way to look through your graveyard. I can do the graveyard slide and look, but basically by me doing this, by me taking my hand or taking my graveyard and sliding it across the field, yeah, I'm looking cool, you know, I'm a pro player, it's awesome, whatever. I'm giving my opponent a mental reminder of cards in my graveyard that they might have forgotten about. Now, both players have the opportunity to check their opponent's graveyard at any time during the game, unless a card says that you can't. But I can only think of one card that says that. Basically, I might remind them that I have a Plague Spreader zombie in my graveyard if they're not paying attention. So that might potentially make them do something to this Plague Spreader that they might not have done if I just had my graveyard just like this and pick it up every time that I need to look at it. So that's something that I keep in mind with this, is I don't normally graveyard slide because of the mental reminders. But everyone wants to be able to graveyard slide. Everyone wants to be able to look cool. So if I just pick up my graveyard and I push down and move, this is what I get. Basically, the way to do this is you're almost doing a motion like this. You're almost fanning or almost bending your cards. So what I'm doing here is, as I'm sliding, I'm kind of using my thumb to push the stack of cards. And it happens so quickly. But this really is one that's hard to teach. But I'm using my thumb as a guide to be able to keep the spacing correct. And sometimes it still doesn't work out. If your sleeves are new, this is easier to do. But if I just push hard as I can, see I have a big gap, you really just want that flow. You want to find the flow. And you get better at it with time. I'm a little rusty at it because, like I said, I've pretty much stopped doing it once I learned about the information that you could potentially be giving away to your opponent. Then, you know, you can do cool things. You can impress your friends. You can do stuff like this. Or hold on, let me try again.
12 hours later.
You know, fan out your graveyard nice. You can flip your graveyard cards over a couple times. You know, really just make your opponent feel like the noob that they are. But I would recommend everyone just keep to the basics in the beginning and then kind of just work your way up with your advanced shuffling methods. Closing points of this video are going to be: make sure that you're not using cards that are of value, and most importantly, that you're not trying to do things to your opponent's cards that you would never do to yours. If someone picked up my deck and they shotgun shuffled it, I would be very upset. I would say, you know, I hope you didn't hurt anything, because if you did, we're going to have to call a judge because something will have to be done. So you don't want to do any of these shuffles to your opponent's deck if you are not comfortable yet enough. If you're not comfortable enough yet to do it to your own cards, don't go and do it to someone else's. You want to make sure that you've gotten a good understanding of this down pat, because there's nothing that feels weirder than trying to shuffle your opponent's deck. It goes all over the table. All of a sudden, you know what your opponent's playing, and it's just not a good time. Your opponent gets angry at you. Not a good time. So stick to the basic cuts, the basic shuffles. You can do a YuGi shuffle if you have to. This is sufficient enough. Yeah, guys, so that's about it for today's video on shuffling, hand shuffling, sleeves, mats, all things of that nature. So if you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see anything else like this, please comment it down below, and I will definitely take it into consideration. This is Mike from the Edison Club, signing out. Until the next one, take care, everybody.